Rain fell on Main Street. Marcus walked slow. His shoes made soft sounds on wet stones. He held $12 tight in his coat. The flower shop sat between two old buildings in downtown Cedar Falls, Iowa. Marcus had passed it every day for 3 years, watching other customers choose bright bouquets while he counted quarters for bus fare. Today felt different. Today was the anniversary. Through the rain-streaked window, he watched Mrs. Chin arrange white roses behind the counter. His daughter Emma would have loved those roses. She always said white flowers looked like clouds that fell from heaven. Marcus pressed his face against the cold glass, feeling the weight of his last $12. The bell above the door chimed as he entered. Water dripped from his worn jacket onto the polished floor. Mrs. Chin looked up from her flowers, her weathered hands still holding the stems. She had seen him before, this quiet man who walked past her shop each morning on his way to the factory. "Can I help you today?" she asked, her voice gentle but curious. Marcus stood near the door, suddenly aware of how his clothes looked. His work boots were scuffed, his jeans faded from too many washes. The other customers who came here wore nice coats and drove clean cars. But Emma deserved flowers on this day, even if they cost everything he had left. "I need something white," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Something pure and clean." Mrs. Chin studied his face. She had learned to read people after 40 years of selling flowers for every human occasion. This man carried grief like a heavy coat, the kind that never quite fit right. She moved toward the white roses, then stopped. "How much are you looking to spend?" she asked. Marcus pulled out his crumpled bills. 3 5s, 7 1s, the sum of his remaining hope until his next paycheck in 4 days. He had already chosen between flowers and lunch for the rest of the week. $12, he said. "That's all I have." Mrs. Chin nodded slowly. She had seen this before. People stretching their last dollars for something that mattered more than food or rent. She selected 3 white roses and began wrapping them in simple paper. "These are special roses," she said as she worked. "They bloom longer than others. They remember love even when everything else fades." Marcus watched her hands move with practiced care. Each fold of paper felt like a small ceremony, a recognition that his $12 carried more weight than larger purchases made with credit cards. The shop door opened behind him. Wind and rain swept in, followed by a woman in her 70s wearing a dark coat. She moved with the careful steps of someone who had learned to navigate the world despite failing eyesight. Marcus stepped aside to give her room. "Mrs. Chun," the woman said, "I need the usual arrangement for the cemetery. White roses and baby's breath." "Of course, Mrs. Blackwood," Mrs. Chin replied. "The same as every month." Marcus finished the transaction and took his small bundle of roses. As he turned to leave, he caught sight of Mrs. Blackwood's face. She was blind, he realized, her eyes clouded with cataracts. She held a white cane in one hand and a worn envelope in the other. "Excuse me," she said, turning toward the sound of his footsteps. "Are you going toward Pine Hill Cemetery by any chance?" Marcus paused at the door. Pine Hill was where Emma rested, where he was heading with his 3 white roses. The cemetery sat 2 miles outside town, too far to walk in the rain for someone who couldn't see. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "I can give you a ride if you need one." Mrs. Blackwood smiled, the first real smile Marcus had seen all day. "That would be very kind. My usual driver is sick today, and the taxi service doesn't run in this weather." They walked together to Marcus's 15-year-old Honda, parked beneath a streetlight that flickered on and off. The car had rust spots and a dented bumper, but it ran reliably. Marcus helped Mrs. Blackwood into the passenger seat, placing her flowers carefully in the back next to his own. As they drove through the rain, Mrs. Blackwood spoke about her monthly visits to the cemetery. She had been coming for 12 years, always on the same day, always with the same flowers. She never explained who she was visiting, and Marcus didn't ask. Grief was private. He understood. It lived in the spaces between words. "You seem like a good man," she said as they turned onto Cemetery Road. "Not many people would help a stranger on a day like this." Marcus focused on the road. The windshield wipers moved back and forth, fighting the rain. "We all need help sometimes," he said. Pine Hill Cemetery stretched across rolling hills dotted with oak trees. The older sections contain elaborate headstones from the 1800s, while newer areas featured simple markers flush with the grass. Marcus parked near the main entrance, where a covered pavilion provided shelter from the rain. "My visit is in Section C," Mrs. Blackwood said. "Row 15. I know the way, even in this weather." Marcus nodded, though she couldn't see it. His own destination was Section B, where smaller headstones marked the graves of children. Emma's marker was simple granite with her name and dates. Emma Rose Patterson, age 7, beloved daughter. They walked together down the main path, their footsteps muffled by wet grass. At the junction where the paths divided, Mrs. Blackwood stopped. "Thank you for the ride," she said. "I'll find my way from here." Marcus watched her disappear into the rain, her white cane tapping against the concrete path. Then he turned towards Section B, carrying his 3 white roses. Emma's grave looked smaller than he remembered. The headstone had been washed clean by the rain, her name standing out clearly against the gray granite. Marcus knelt in the wet grass, not caring about his jeans or the cold seeping through his knees. "Hey, baby girl," he whispered. "Daddy brought you flowers." He placed the roses against the headstone, arranging them carefully. 3 years ago today, Emma had been riding her bicycle in front of their apartment building when a drunk driver ran the red light. Marcus had been at work, installing kitchen cabinets for a family across town. He never got to say goodbye. The rain continued to fall, mixing with tears he hadn't realized were coming. He told Emma about his job, about the small apartment he kept clean for when she came home. He knew she wasn't coming home, but talking to her made the world feel less empty. "I'm trying to be good, Emma," he said. "I'm trying to be the daddy you deserved." Through the rain, he heard footsteps approaching. Mrs. Blackwood emerged from the mist, walking slowly but steadily. She stopped at the grave next to Emma's, a marker Marcus had never really noticed before. "David Michael Blackwood," she said, reading the name aloud. "Age 34. Bénévent." Marcus looked up, surprised. Mrs. Blackwood was kneeling at the grave beside Emma's, placing her white roses and baby's breath against the headstone. Rain dripped from her silver hair, but she didn't seem to notice. "This is my son," she said, speaking to Marcus though she continued to face the headstone. "He was killed by a drunk driver 3 years ago. He was driving home from work when it happened." Marcus felt his breath catch. The same day Emma died, there had been 2 victims in the accident. He had been so consumed with his own grief that he never thought about the other family affected. 3 years ago, he said, his voice barely audible. March 15th. Mrs. Blackwood turned toward him, her clouded eyes somehow finding his face. "Yes, March 15th. The man who hit them was driving a stolen car. He ran a red light at the intersection of Main and 3rd Street. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Marcus had read the police report dozens of times, memorizing every detail. 2 vehicles hit, 2 lives lost. He had focused only on Emma, never considering that someone else was grieving just as deeply. "My daughter," Marcus whispered. "Emma, she was 7 years old." Mrs. Blackwood's hand moved to her chest, her fingers finding the worn envelope she always carried. She opened it carefully, protecting the contents from the rain. Inside was a photograph of a young man in a police uniform, smiling at the camera. David was a police officer, she said. He had just finished his shift when the accident happened. He was driving home to his family. Marcus stared at the photograph. Officer David Blackwood looked kind, the sort of man who would help strangers and keep his promises, the sort of man Emma would have liked. "I'm sorry," Marcus said. "I'm so sorry about your son." Mrs. Blackwood folded the photograph carefully and placed it back in the envelope. "I'm sorry about your daughter," she said. "I never knew her name was Emma. Emma Rose. That's a beautiful name." They knelt in the rain between the 2 graves, 2 strangers united by the same moment of loss. Marcus thought about all the times he had driven past Mrs. Blackwood waiting for buses, all the months they had unknowingly shared the same grief. "I should have helped you before," he said. "I should have offered you rides to the cemetery." Mrs. Blackwood shook her head. "You weren't ready before." Grief has its own timeline. Today you were ready to help a stranger. That's what matters. As they prepared to leave, Mrs. Blackwood reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. The paper was expensive, embossed with gold lettering. Blackwood Foundation, helping families in crisis. My husband and I started this foundation after David died, she explained. We help families who are struggling financially after losing a loved one. Funeral costs, medical bills, basic needs. David always said the best way to honor the dead is to help the living. Marcus took the card, feeling the weight of the thick paper. The address was in the wealthy part of town, near the country club and the new shopping centers. I don't understand, he said. Mrs. Blackwood smiled sadly. I've been watching you for months, Marcus. You walk past the flower shop every morning, always looking at the flowers but never buying any. You take the bus to work even when it's raining, because you can't afford gas. You eat lunch at the diner only on Fridays, because that's when they have the cheapest special. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. He hadn't realized anyone was watching, cataloging his small struggles. I'm not charity, he said quietly. No, Mrs. Blackwood agreed. You're not charity. You're a good man who deserves help. There's a difference. She explained that the foundation had been investigating his situation for weeks, ever since their social worker noticed him at the cemetery. They had learned about his job at the cabinet factory, his spotless driving record, his perfect attendance despite having no car. They knew about the small apartment he kept immaculate, the money he saved in a coffee can for Emma's headstone maintenance. We also know about your night classes, she said. Business administration at the community college. You're trying to build a better life even while you're grieving. Marcus stared at her. He hadn't told anyone about the classes, the way he studied after his factory shifts, determined to eventually start his own carpentry business. It was a dream he and Emma had shared, the idea of building beautiful things together. The foundation wants to offer you a scholarship, Mrs. Blackwood continued. Full tuition for the rest of your degree program. And we have a job opening at our main office. Administrative assistant, Monday through Friday, good benefits. It pays enough for you to buy flowers whenever you want. The rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle. Marcus looked at Emma's grave, at the 3 white roses he had placed there with his last $12. It felt like a sign, like Emma was somehow arranging things from wherever she was now. Why, he asked. Why would you do this for me? Mrs. Blackwood stood slowly, her hand finding her white cane. Because David would have wanted me to. Because helping you helps me remember that there's still good in the world. Because a man who spends his last $12 on flowers for his daughter is the kind of man who deserves a second chance. They walked back to the car together, moving slowly through the cemetery's quiet pathways. The rain had stopped completely, and late afternoon sunlight was beginning to break through the clouds. There's something else, Mrs. Blackwood said as they reached the car. The foundation is planning to build a memorial garden in the park where the accident happened. A place for families to remember loved ones lost in traffic accidents. We like to name it after Emma and David. Marcus felt his knees weaken. A memorial garden where children could play safely, where families could remember without fear. It was exactly what Emma would have wanted. The Emma Rose and David Michael Memorial Garden. Mrs. Blackwood continued, with white roses and baby's breath. A place where love is stronger than loss. As they drove back through town, Marcus thought about the strange turns life could take. This morning, he had been a man spending his last $12 on flowers. Tonight, he would be a man with a future, a purpose, a reason to believe in kindness again. Mrs. Blackwood, he said as they pulled up to the flower shop where her limousine was waiting. I want to keep bringing you to the cemetery. Not because you need the ride, but because I think Emma and David would want us to visit them together. Mrs. Blackwood smiled, the same gentle expression she had worn when she first asked for help. I think you're right, she said. I think they like that very much. The limousine driver, a patient man named Robert who had been with the Blackwood family for 20 years, helped Mrs. Blackwood from Marcus's car. But before getting into the limousine, she turned back to Marcus. Next month, she said, when we visit the cemetery, let's bring enough flowers for both of them. White roses and baby's breath. My treat. Marcus nodded, feeling something like hope stirring in his chest. I'd like that, he said. I'd like that very much. As the limousine drove away, Marcus sat in his car outside the flower shop. Through the window, he could see Mrs. Chen arranging flowers for the next day's customers. Tomorrow he would come back, not to spend his last $12, but to place an order for the Memorial Garden groundbreaking ceremony. He thought about Emma, about the white roses that would bloom in her memory. He thought about David Blackwood, the police officer who had died on the same day, whose mother had been watching over a grieving stranger without him ever knowing. Most of all, he thought about the mysterious ways that kindness could change everything, how $12 spent on flowers could lead to a new life, a new purpose, a new reason to believe that love really was stronger than loss. The rain had stopped completely now, and the first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Marcus started his car and drove home to his small apartment, where he would call the community college, and tell them he could finally afford to continue his education. As he climbed the stairs to his second-floor apartment, Marcus paused at the door. Inside, everything remained exactly as it had been 3 years ago. Emma's drawing still covered the refrigerator. Her small shoes still sat by the door, waiting for feet that would never fill them again. He had kept her room untouched, a shrine to a little girl who used to wake him up on Saturday mornings demanding pancakes shaped like butterflies. Tonight, for the first time since her death, he walked into that room and sat on her small bed, holding the business card Mrs. Blackwood had given him. "Emma, baby," he whispered to the silent room filled with stuffed animals and picture books, "I think something good is finally happening. I think you sent Mrs. Blackwood to help Daddy, didn't you?" He picked up her favorite teddy bear, the one with the missing eye that she had refused to let him repair because she said it made him special. "I'm going to make you proud, sweetheart. I'm going to build something beautiful in your memory, and maybe other daddies won't have to hurt the way I've been hurting." That night, Marcus dreamed of Emma for the first time in months. In the dream, she was playing in a garden filled with white roses, laughing as she chased butterflies with another child, a boy who looked remarkably like the photograph Mrs. Blackwood had shown him. When he woke the next morning, Marcus found himself smiling through his tears, carrying a peace he hadn't felt since that terrible day 3 years ago. He knew then that healing didn't mean forgetting, but rather learning to carry love forward into whatever came next. Tomorrow would bring new possibilities, new chances to help others the way Mrs. Blackwood had helped him. But tonight, he would simply remember Emma and be grateful for the day when spending his last $12 on flowers had led him to discover that he was not alone in his grief, and that sometimes the most beautiful gardens grow from the deepest sorrow.